All right. I sent out a tweet this morning where I said, hey, it's Monday. What should I create this week and what would be hugely valuable to you? And starting to get some good suggestions. But I got a few questions from Joseph that I really liked and thought I'd just start out the week by answering. First, he says, I'd like to see a video blog about what measures you take to consistently produce quality content. Consistency is a key issue in virtually any productive venture, and one that I'm still riding on a roller coaster. Then he follows that up with, secondly, and relatedly, I'm more than curious to how you originated and developed the idea to start your latest venture, as well as the essential work involved in creating, building, maintaining the infrastructure to launch and keep it going consistently. So there's a third part that I'll come back to, but first of all, thank you. Those are really nice comments. It's great that people have been getting a lot of value out of what I'm doing. And I would start out by saying, the way this came about is I had an experience a couple years ago where I was editing a friend's work and just realized how much I liked it, and it occurred to me that, if I could make a career out of mostly just helping other people become more effective communicators, that would be really exciting, but it didn't seem very realistic at the time, in part because I was thinking about it in a very narrow sense. Like, how can I help people interested in Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism become better communicators? And it just didn't seem like there was a huge market for that, particularly when you consider that most of the people who need the most help are young and broke. But just in general, I knew this about myself, that I've always gotten the most satisfaction out of helping other people become more effective and successful in the realm of ideas. And whether that was people who are starting out, years behind me, or whether it was people who were even better than I was and I could accelerate their successes. So if you think about what I was doing with Alex Epstein at the Center for Industrial Progress, a lot of that was in part for my own learning, but in part I thought that I had a skill set that could help him accelerate his impact in a way that would be more impactful than me just doing a kind of similar thing on another topic. So I had this kind of in the back of my mind, and then with COVID and the oil crash, it just necessitated a big shift in how I structured my career. And it was about that time that a friend of mine, John, said, hey, why don't you create a course around the kind of stuff you've taught me, giving me feedback, and just if I had all these lessons that you've given in one place that I could hold and retain, that would be really useful. And so that was kind of kicking around in my head. And initially, I've come mostly from the school of marketing, where I'm sure you've had this experience. It's like you get something free, you give them your email address, they put you into a funnel, and they try to sell you an expensive course. And maybe that's really valuable, maybe not, but sometimes it is. And basically, you have a business that's optimized around sales. But a funny thing happened at the same time, or let's say a really good thing, which is I was able to score a handful of really significant clients where I was helping them actually create content instead of just kind of the editorial feedback. And so it basically took away any concern for making money. And at the same time, I stumbled onto a video by a guy I'd heard of but hadn't followed in many years, Gary Vaynerchuk. And he basically was explaining his approach to producing content, which was you're just creating as much free content that would be really valuable to the audience as possible, and just having confidence that that will lead somewhere good in the long term versus just trying to monetize everything. And that really fit with kind of what my goals were, because I didn't just want to figure out a way to pay the bills. What I was mostly interested in, or the problem that I'm really interested in solving with my life, and this is something else I realized a few years ago, which is how do we scale teaching people to be better thinkers and communicators in the realm of good ideas, whether that's objectivism or even more broadly liberty. And so I thought, well, this is a really good opportunity to figure out how can I help scale that. And so the basic insight was I'm going to share as much as I know for free, available to anyone, and just put it out there. and then just charge for any kind of one-on-one work that I do with people, and then accept supporters. And the idea was that, as this grows, this will be a real self-sustaining model. Whereas if I'm just charging a lot up front, two things happen. So first of all, I'm not really achieving my goal or maximizing my ability to achieve my goal of scaling the communication of good ideas. And second, I'm really pretty much trapping myself with my current audience. Or at least you could say it's a lot harder to break through to a non-objectivist audience with whom I don't already have a reputation than if there's just this fountain of content out there for free. And so that was basically the insight and the inception of everything that I'm doing was, all right, I'm just going to do everything possible to create great content and give it away and hope that people can make use of it. And one of the things that's been really satisfying, I noticed a couple years ago when Alex launched the Human Flourishing Project podcast, that there was a relatively small number of people who were interested in it. He wasn't doing a lot to promote it, but there was a deep enthusiasm, people listening to every episode, people applying the ideas, people eager for more content. And part of what I realized is that ideas that can be really valuable and really scalable and really successful, what you see at the beginning is from the start, you have a small number of super enthusiastic fans and supporters. And for projects that don't have that at the beginning, I don't think that they ultimately scale into having lots of people with that attitude. And if I thought back to my works, there was people who liked them a lot, and people who thought my content was pretty good and liked reading my blog post or whatever I was producing at the time. But there wasn't this sort of deep, rabid enthusiasm where I was constantly getting emails, people were sharing everything, people were asking questions, there was a lot of engagement. And this, when I started doing this, it instantly started clicking with people, and there was, at very small numbers, and it continues to be pretty small numbers, a real excitement around what I'm doing. And so that told me, all right, I'm on the right track. And even if I don't know how this is going to play out long term, or even exactly what kind of content I'm going to be creating and what formats, but it was basically, that was the market test that I wanted that said, all right, keep going in this direction. And part of and so what I've wanted to do has sort of evolved along those lines, where I'm just more and more geared to how do I really build a connection with the audience. So one of the things that I've talked about, I forget where, but is if I thought back to the work that I was doing in the past, there was sort of always this focus on, I want this to be valuable to a big audience. I want to win over a big audience for good ideas. And yet there was not really a connection with or appreciation of the people who were already interested. That was kind of taken for granted. And so people would post on social media and comment on my stuff or on YouTube, and it would be kind of radio silence. From me, it would be taking for granted that enthusiasm that really existed. And now my basic principle is the most important people I'm dealing with are the ones who are already interested and really trying to create a relationship where they're getting a lot of value from, because certainly I get a lot of value from that, not just in terms of people saying nice things, which is always nice, but asking really interesting questions, giving me a sense of what is genuinely valuable in terms of what I should be creating and what's not so much, and here's ways to improve. Like, for instance, I know a lot of you are still thinking, what is this background? I'm still stuck in my in-laws' house, but we have an amazing apartment where I'll be able to build a real studio, and so we'll be able to continually raise the quality as we go. But in terms of the ability to regularly produce high-quality content, first of all, you have to realize I'm cashing in on like 20 years of experience. So, if I was just getting started, it would be I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now, at least not in the form, because, it would be, I'm trying to figure things out and it would take a long time to create anything worthwhile. But that's why one of the things I encourage is, if you're in the early part of that learning curve, Gary Vaynerchuk has this idea of instead of creating, you're basically sharing your process. You're letting people in on the journey, and so you're creating content that's mostly about, I'm trying this, I did this, I ran into this obstacle. And so you can put out a lot of content, but it's not coming from the place of pretending to have mastery over the subject, but as somebody pursuing a certain journey. And I really like that idea. I think that's a really great approach, and it prevents, I think, or it helps mitigate the desire to like, oh, I'm going to aim only for perfect and not put anything out that's not great and deeply insightful. I've definitely, I mean, insofar as people have the view of I'm putting out consistently good content, I'm not even thinking about it that way. The way I have it set up is I have a basic structure right now, and it's open to evolving, but it's every day I'm going to do one of these short videos where I just give some insight on building an audience. I'm going to do one episode of my podcast a week, and I'm going to try to write an article a week, and then have a lot of engagement on all my different social media channels and on email, be really responsive. And then every 2 weeks, try to have one of my Unlocking Liberty masterminds, and then schedule my one-on-one clients and my other consulting work in there. So it's a lot, but that's part of, like, if you say, what's my process? There's not really a process. There's basically, I'm really excited about the work, and I feel a lot of pressure because I have a lot of commitments. And so it's just hustle. It's just saying, these are what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it. Joseph had a third comment, which basically was about, working with others versus for yourself, and the way in which others kind of supply certain commitments. And I totally get that. My wife is that same way. I'm much more the other way, which is that commitments to other people are not as motivating as my enthusiasm for the stuff that I'm doing. So for me, it's much more, I would rather sit and make content for you guys all day if I could, but instead I have these other obligations to clients whom I love. You guys are awesome, and I do give you the time to make sure that I do good work for you. But for the audience in general, I would love to be doing this stuff. It's hard to pull me away from it. So my basic advice, and I've said this for a long time, I don't have a productivity system. I don't have recommendations for how one develops systems and processes and routines. Basically, what I try to do is find things that obsess me and that I can't stay away from, and just go all in on them. So, when I wrote Equals Unfair in a year from the time Yaron and I talked about, hey, we should do a book on inequality, to when it came out, it was not a question of how do I establish a system to make sure I actually do this. It was, I was totally engulfed in this to the point that my wife would tell you, she had to go out of her way to try to get me to focus on anything else. And so whether that's healthy or unhealthy, I don't know, but it's certainly the path that I've gone. And so it's very hard for me to give advice for how do you institute that kind of motivation and accountability, if it's not already there. But I would say you need to figure out what works for you. And so if it is look, I need to work for somebody, that's totally legitimate. If it's, I need to have an accountability partner, I need to have some sort of external deadline, set up whatever you need to get the result you want. And that I think the larger issue here is just being really self-aware and honest with yourself about who you are and how you are. One of the things that I've seen so common is that people just have this ideal of if I was this type of person, I could achieve all these great things. So if I was a morning person, and they'll even hear me talk about getting up at 4:30 or 5:30, oh my gosh, I would be so much better. And then let me try to change who I am. And I've become much more in the camp of, there's certainly things that you should work on changing. And it's not just do whatever you feel like all the time. But I'm much more in favor of figuring out where you are and how to maximize that, rather than how do you change what you are, because change is super difficult for almost everything, even minor habits. It's super difficult. And so you want to reserve that for the cases where you really do have to change. If you're completely out of shape and it's making you sick and tired and you're not able to get dates or whatever, okay, you have to get in the gym. You have to start eating differently. There's actual changes you have to make. But if you're not a morning person, well, where are your high energy levels and how do you build your life around that? And so what I would really say is you have to figure out, how do I what would be a situation in which I would most naturally and easily create regular great content and find that easier than not doing it. And then you just have to figure out, how do I build my life or get to where I can build my life around that kind of situation, or come as close to it as I can. And some of that can just mean temporarily pushing yourself through pure grit. So, I wrote a novel last year, which will be coming out next year once it gets totally finished up. And that was just pure, I'm going to sit down and use every free moment to work on this, even though I have 100 other obligations, even though it's not always fun, because this is something really important. Now, it helped that most of it spilled out me. Most of it was this kind of obsessive quest to create something. But there were definitely times when it was just pure, no, I want the end result, and so I'm going to pay the price to get there. And so sometimes that's something you have to do, but what you should really strive to do is make that as temporary as possible. Any other ideas in terms of like the quality of content? I would say the basic point is this, is that I think too often content creators are thinking about themselves. How am I going to come off? Are people going to like this? Are people going to buy this? And what they're being stopped by that fear, and they're being stopped by the terror that they'll be judged negatively or that nobody will care. And you just have to set all of that aside, and really it should be a combination of two things. So one is you're picking a general sphere of creativity that you are in love with, it. You love the doing, you love the process. So I love creating this content, and by some people's, if I look at the people with 20,000 or 200,000 or 2 million YouTube followers, and with email lists of 10,000 subscribers, that could be really demotivating. But that's totally it's not even on my radar screen. It does not even matter, because I love the process. And so for me, it is that I'll be happy if I can continue to live a life where I'm creating this content for the 600 people or whomever are subscribed on YouTube, or whatever those numbers are. That's totally irrelevant. So I'm picking an enterprise where I love the process. I love the doing. The result is that's incidental. Yeah, I have this aim. I want to scale the objectivist movement. I want to scale the liberty movement. I want the good ideas to win out, and I want advocates for good ideas. I want there to be more of them, and I want them to be better. But all of that is just that's setting a general orientation. But what I really care about is the process of waking up each morning saying, all right, what's my video today? How can I write this piece? What is a new take or a new kind of organization or a new strategy that could enhance our ability to communicate good ideas? What would be a really unexpected kind of video I could create? Who would be the best podcast guests I might get? It's that process that is really driving me. But once I have that general orientation and love the doing for any particular piece of content, what I'm thinking about is not how I'm going to be judged, but what will be helpful to the audience. Everything is focused on, okay, who am I talking to? What do they want? What do they need? What will be most helpful that I can actually supply? And be totally comfortable that sometimes I'm going to get it wrong. Sometimes the video will not be very good. Sometimes it just won't get many hits or interactions. Sometimes I'll put my foot in my mouth. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often, but that I don't care. That's not my focus. My focus is on what's the process I like, and then how can I be most helpful at each step. And I think if you're on the right path and you have that right orientation and you're doing something that's really clicking with a small number of people, then you get this self-reinforcing system that eventually I think will have the potential to take off if you have the goods, if you can actually deliver something valuable that people are excited, enthusiastic about. And the mistake, I'd caution against is trying to backwards engineer it of, I'm going to predict the market and I'm going to do whatever maximizes my current number of likes or my current conversions and sales figures. And yes, that involves playing the long game. And so I'm very sympathetic to people who are in a situation where, I'm lucky in that I don't have to worry about short-term monetization of a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. Although I'm trying to do that because that's market feedback and it enhances my ability to do new, bolder, more experimental things, and certainly creates a certain kind of security. But like play the long game. Focus on what could I do and be totally comfortable doing, knowing that it might take 4, 5, 6, 7 years to really take off. That's where you want to be. You want to be able to ride the highway of patience, because if you're consistent and good, it's going to pay off, or at least it very likely will pay off. One of the things that I'm trying to communicate to people is, what can you do to maximize the chances of that happening? What can you do to bring your quality to a higher level? But patience, like be able to structure your career as much as you can around patience, because that is going to give you the kind of long-term enduring success and prevent you from making mistakes that will really let you win in the short run and then leave you without a long run. So those are some initial thoughts. I hope it gives you a sort of perspective on like how I got here, what my aims are. And I should say this is all super in flux. Like I'm constantly looking for and open to radically changing directions if I see an opportunity or an idea that fits with what I'm doing. But at the same time, I'm not chasing anything. I'm not desperately looking for, all right, well, how do I get 10 more clients? How do I get a little bit more business? I have a path. I'm enjoying that path and just open to wherever it will lead, and not trying to control the universe and time by mapping things out too far ahead. Just being focused on, what am I enjoying? What does my audience need? And then structuring things in alignment with what allows me naturally to do really good work. So hopefully that's useful. I know it's not super tactical, but I don't think super tactical is what most people need. I think what most people need is the right kind of philosophy of creation. And so give it a shot. If you have any follow-up questions, let me know. Make sure everybody subscribes to the channel and likes the video, all that good stuff. And as always, the best way to follow my work is sign up at donswriting.com. And look, if you're a creator and you really want to step up your game, whether it's I want to further my career, I want to build my audience, I want to create better content, I'm working with one-on-one clients. And so you can just reach out to me at don@donswriting.com and we'll set up a call, or you can go to the website where there's information on how to work with me there. So enjoy, good luck, really excited to see what you guys are all creating. Talk soon.